Miami fans should be feeling really good about the line of scrimmage. The offensive line, arguably the best in the entire country, but it's the defensive line that's going to make or break a playoff run this year.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Miami Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we'll break down probably the most critical defensive stat for this upcoming season. We know Miami's D underperformed last year. If you just go by total defense, which is the yardage allowed, they weren't bad at 27th in the country. That's pretty good. So how did they manage to give up as many points as they did? We'll tell you what happened and what needs to be fixed by Corey Heatherman and company this upcoming year. We'll talk about the Hurricanes football players with the most to gain and the most to lose this upcoming season. And yeah, I promised I would do it. I gave myself the homework assignment this week of creating my projected two deep depth chart for Miami this year. I've done it. I'll give it to you guys. And I will note again, in looking specifically at my defensive line, when you start to crunch the numbers and you look at who could start, who could play when, Miami, as we know, has, I would say, an embarrassment of riches at edge rusher, but certain guys have to live up to the billing. And then the interior, that's boom or bust, because I believe Miami has talent there, but do they have enough depth? And if you look at early season matchups, why I say defensive line could make or break a playoff run this year, week one, you go up against probably the best running back room in the entire country against Notre Dame. Your D-line has to play a big part in hopefully slowing them down. Week 4 against Florida, you go up against one of the most heralded offensive lines in the country because the UFO line is getting a ton of respect and hype this year, and you don't want to give DJ Lagway much time to throw. And then, of course, the ACC schedule always ends up being tricky. You want to keep your defensive linemen healthy throughout that. But in going through my two deep, we'll get to the defense. I know folks like to get the sexy start. Let's talk about the offense first. At quarterback, Carson Beck is your starter, no-brainer. I've got Emory Williams as the number 2 quarterback this season. He's had a strong camp, had a strong spring, a strong camp to really solidify himself as the number 2. Obviously, everyone's excited about the future of Luke Nickel, as am I. And I will also note that Judd Anderson is also there working his butt off every single day. But as for right now, I think it's very safe to say that Emory Williams, who's got the experience and he's got the reps, he's going to be the guy who is going to be positioned second behind Carson Beck this year. I feel pretty strongly about that one. At running back, I'm going to go chalk on this one, understanding that the rotation's going to be at least 3 deep, but I've got Mark Fletcher as my starting running back. He's got the experience and he's got the power and size. 6 foot, is he 6 foot? 3, 225 pounds this year. And I'm going to go with Jordan Lyle as the number 2 back this year. He's gotten himself to over 200 pounds. He told me at media day he's up to 205, and Lyle has got the speed and explosion. I think Jordan Lyle is going to be someone who turns a lot of heads nationally. I'm also not sleeping on transfer Marty Brown from North Dakota State. I think he's going to play quite a bit, and we'll have to see how much Chris Wheatley-Humphrey and freshman Gerard Pringle get on the field. But I'm going with Mark Fletcher. Jordan Lyle is my 2 deep at running back. At tight end, nothing surprising or earth-shattering here. I'm going with Elijah Lofton, Mr. Utility. That dude is just a football player. He's a damn good football player. You can line him up anywhere, but I think he's going to be the starting tight end this year, the number 1. He's going to be an important weapon and safety valve for Carson Beck. And then Tulane transfer Alex Bowman, I think, has proven he's going to be probably the number 2 guy. He's going to play quite a bit this year. I think he's going to be especially important. He's a good blocker, but I think as a receiver, he'll also be important in short yardage and goal line type of situations, a really good red zone threat potentially. And I could also see, Luka Gilbert, true freshman, getting some playing time there, and Brock Schott as well. but I'm going to go with Elijah Lofton as my number 1. Alex Bowman is my number 2. When we start to get the receivers, this is where it gets really tough for me because in a good way, I've had a hard time determining who's really creating separation. And I say that not because these guys aren't any good. I say it for the opposite reason. I think that there have been more than a half dozen receivers that have been performing at a really high level, and it's really difficult to come up with who starts, who comes off the bench, especially when you've got a couple of true freshmen who objectively, I believe, at times, and I say at times because, of course, I haven't been at every single practice, so I don't want to speak out of turn or out of context here, but at times, Malachi Toney and Josh Moore have looked like the best receivers on the field. Maybe not at all times, but at times they have. So I'll predict the slot first. It's a big job. You got to fill the shoes that Xavier Restrepo leaves behind. This is one where I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Malachi Toney ends up starting there. True freshman, actually enrolled a year early out of American Heritage. I mean, he has been so consistently good since spring football through fall camp. I'm going to take a leap of faith and say that this is a true freshman who is going to get at the top of the depth chart. And I'm going to have Tony Johnson, the transfer from Cincinnati, probably as the number 2 slot guy. That might be an or between the names, between Tony Johnson and Ray Joseph. It's a little harder to predict. And long and the short of it is, I think 2 or 3 of these guys are going to play. They're going to rotate more than they did with Xavier Restrepo the last couple of years, who rarely ever left the field. But that's the first, kind of leap of faith that I'm going to take, and that's Malachi Toney being your starter in the slot. I am really, really, really tempted to do the same thing with Josh Moore, but I have a hard time saying it with my chest here on August 21st, 10 days ahead of the opener, that Josh Moore is actually going to take a starting job from either CJ Daniels, who's been practicing really well, and he's a 6-year guy, or JoJo Trader, who is really an ascending player. So I'm going to go with, at X receiver, I'm going to have CJ Daniels starting and Josh Moore being, the first guy up. But again, we'll circle this one because it wouldn't shock me if Josh Moore ends up starting, if not the opener, starting games this season, because not only does he use his body well for contested balls, he also is, I think, the most legitimate downfield go route threat on this team when it comes to the receivers. He's got those long strides. He's got deceptive speed. But for now, I'm going to have him second on the depth chart behind CJ Daniels, and I'm going to have JoJo Trader followed by Keelan Marion at Z receiver. That one was not easy for me, all of these at receiver. And I just want to note something. When it comes to surprises, we're not going to see like Mario Cristobal's depth chart until probably right before the Notre Dame game kicks off. And there's always things on there that surprise me for the first game of the season, right? I don't think a lot of us were expecting Ryan Rodriguez to start the first game at left guard, and he played well. He got injured in that game, but we didn't expect him necessarily to start over Matthew McCoy and Samson Okunlola, and he did. And I don't necessarily think we expected O.J. Frederick to be a week 1 starter at corner last year. Not only was he a week 1 starter, he never surrendered a starting job as a true freshman last season. So there are always some surprises. And of course, my depth chart is not Mario's depth chart. We'll compare notes in about 10 days on that one. Let's go through the offensive line. At left tackle, I've got Markel Bell, of course, with Samson Okunlola backing him up. At left guard, again, this surprised us last year, but for this year, I'm going to go with Matthew McCoy as the starter and Ryan Rodriguez as the backup there. I've also got Ryan Rodriguez as the primary backup center behind James Brockermeyer, who's going to start at center. I think S.J. Olofaituli is the center of the future. I think Rodriguez's experience is probably going to give him the edge to be the first man up there if necessary. At right guard, of course, we go with Inez Cooper as the starter, and I'll go with Juan Minaya, who's having a really strong camp as the backup right guard. And then I'll go with Cece Mauinoa, of course, as the starting right tackle. And I'll go with Big Bruno, Tommy Kinsler, as the backup right tackle. We're going to get to the defense when we come back. And folks, again, Miami's defensive line, you tell me if I'm getting anything wrong here, but I think this is going to be the make or break unit when it comes to possibly propelling the Hurricanes into their first ever college football playoff appearance. You want to keep it locked? We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Guys, I love that the company is completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment just discreetly to your door. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege and use our code LOCKEDONCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved, do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Thank you for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. We're going to have a full conference preview. I think that's also going to simulcast on the Locked On Canes channel, but make sure you check out Locked On ACC as well. I'm going to try to stand up for Miami. I don't know how much love Miami's going to get from the other ACC hosts, but I will be our knight in shining armor, and I will go to battle on behalf of the Hurricanes. All right, so let's take a look at my my projected two deep. All right, we talked about the offense. Let's take a look at the defensive tackles first. And I think there's a pretty strong presence from the top three guys at defensive tackle. It's a pity only two of them can start, but three of them will play often. And then the big question is going to be fourth, fifth, and possibly sixth players. Will they emerge and earn strong playing time this year? But I've got Justin Scott, second year sophomore. I've got him starting in one of my defensive tackle spots with David Blay, the transfer from Louisiana Tech, backing him up. I could have gone either way with Blay. I could have easily given him a starting job or first guy off the bench because I think he's going to be really important this season. And Blay is someone who Louisiana Tech really excelled, especially as a pass rusher from the interior. I think Miami on paper can produce a lot of sacks this year. But I've got Scott backed up by Blay. And then the other spot, I've got Ahmad Moten starting, and I will have him backed up by true freshman Dante Simpson, who he's earning praise from me based on the way he's performed going back into the spring. I think Dante Simpson, the true freshman out of Chaminade, has been one of the better stories in camp. I even saw him, I can't remember which publication it was, might have been on 3 Sports, but I saw Dante Simpson show up in someone's like preseason all-freshman team. So there are folks out there taking notice with the buzz that Simpson has been generating in camp. So, I've got, again, Justin Scott and Ahmad Moten as my starters, but the depth being the big question. I think we can count on David Blay. I think we can potentially count on Dante Simpson, even though he's very young. Hopefully we can count on Artavius Jones. And then there are certain players who may, primarily be edge guys, but have positional versatility. Armando Blunt, Rueben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, they can move inside when necessary. I think our guy Hayden Lowe at 255 pounds, I should say, as a true freshman, primarily an edge, can also kick inside if necessary. All right, so let's do defensive ends. Very deep position group here. And again, Miami has potential for maybe 2 double-digit sackers this year. I know they haven't had that in a long time, like 2 guys producing 10-plus sacks, but I'm going to have Rueben Bain starting on one side, backed up by Armando Blunt. And I'm going to have Akeem Mesidor starting, and I'm going to have him backed up by Hayden Lowe, true freshman. And again, this is just kind of the way I'm feeling and vibing based on how these guys have performed. But I don't want to leave out other players because, again, edge rusher might be the deepest position group Miami has. Marquise Lightfoot has also been having a really strong training camp. He could find his way into that 2 deep. I don't question that. Cole McConaughey is a guy who could find himself in there. Malik Bryant In fact, I know a lot of people probably have Malik Bryant in their 2 deep. I might be overlooking him. This is not easy. I'm taking a leap of faith on Hayden Lowe. But Malik Bryant, I think, is someone who's going to play a lot and have an impact this year. Then we get to the linebackers. I feel better about this unit, and some of that is the tremendous conversation we had with Popo Aguirre the other day. I mean, how cool was he? If you guys missed Popo, who I think is going to be a prominent member of that linebacker rotation, if you missed our conversation, you can find it on the Locked On Canes podcast channel. Just look for it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on YouTube, and you guys are going to get fired up for the upcoming season the way that I got fired up talking to Popo. So at Mike linebacker, I'm going to have Mohamed Toure starting, backed up by Popo. And I think Popo's going to play quite a bit, even if he doesn't start. At will linebacker, I'm going to go Wesley Basaint starting, and I'm going to go Cameron Bobby Pruitt backing him up. I think there could probably be at least a 5-man rotation overall at linebacker. I'm not sleeping on Jalen Alderman with his experience. Chase Smith has had a strong camp so far. Kellen Wiley Jr. as a true freshman has played really well. So I think linebacker is probably, I would say it's deeper than I thought it was going to be before fall camp started, but those are my primary 2 deep. Mohamed Toure backed up by Popo and Wesley Basaint backed up by Bobby Pruitt. Safeties, I'm going to have Jacoby Thomas starting. Jacoby Thomas backed up by Dylan Day, true sophomore who's having a strong camp. I'm going to have Zachariah Poyser back. This is tough. I'm going to have Zachariah Poyser backed up by maybe Bryce Fitzgerald, but I'm going to go Bryce Fitzgerald or Markeith Williams. Because, again, like Bryce, true freshman, I'm taking a little bit of a leap of faith there, but I keep hearing about what a great camp he's having, so I got to give him some love. At nickel, Keontae Scott, I expect to start, the transfer from Auburn, and I'm going to go Damari Brown backing him up. Brown is a guy with versatility to play multiple spots based on his body type and his physicality. And then at the corners, not surprisingly, I go OJ Frederique starting. I'm going to have Damari Brown being one of the backups. I'll put him behind OJ, and then I'll have Xavier Lucas starting, backed up by Ethan O'Connor. All of those 4, have had a really strong camp to this point. O'Connor was someone we heard about really stepping up in one of those scrimmages and making plays. So I'm going to go with that for my defense. All right, so let's give you guys a little bit of national perspective on this, because I get a question from one of our Locked On Canes insiders, Matt from Alabama. Now, I don't think Matt's a spy. I know Matt asked a question, I think, on a previous Q&A show where he was asking about the roster, and someone's like, hey, that guy with the Alabama area code, he's probably trying to, he's working for Kalen DeBoer, or maybe Nick Saban is still out there, trying to gain intel on Miami's roster. I think Matt from Bama is one of us. He just happens to live in Alabama. He's a Cane through and through. But he says, I was hoping you could do a segment where you grade each position group and tell us where you think they stack up with the rest of the country. He says, for instance, I think Miami probably has the number 1 defensive line room in America, probably a top 10 offensive line, top 10 running back room, etc. You can base it strictly off recruiting rankings, potential, or production. All right, so here's the frame of reference that I'm going by. I'm going by, and I don't agree with all of it, believe me, but the frame of reference that I'm using is the Pro Football Focus college, top 10 at every unit. I think they do have Miami underrated in some of their spots. So, look, an area where I feel strongly Miami is top 5 in the country is at quarterback with Carson Beck starting, right? So other units that stack up well, LSU with Garrett Nussmeier. A lot of people would say Texas with Arch Manning, although the hype has just gotten so unreal for that young man. We all know why, the last name he carries, but listen, he's a good player. We'll see how he does this year. I feel strongly about Arizona State quarterback Sam Leavitt. I think he's really good, and possibly Cade Klubnik. So 3 of those names may be the ones that I'd say you could put them ahead of Carson Beck, and I wouldn't take any issue with it. But I think Carson Beck is top 5 in the entire country. Obviously there's a lot of national love behind DJ Lagway. We'll see how he does this year. He's struggled to stay healthy, training camp and going back to last year. Pro Football Focus has Carson Beck ranked 6th behind LSU with Nussmeier, SMU with Kevin Jennings. I think, listen, no disrespect, I think that's a little high. I mean, Kevin Jennings had a really nice year last year. We'll see if he can capture lightning in a bottle again, but I would not rank Kevin Jennings ahead of Carson Beck. I think it's absurd. Arizona State with Leavitt, I tend to agree. They've got Lagway at Florida ranked fourth. They got Cade Klubnik ranked fifth, and Carson Beck behind those guys. At running back is an area where sometimes I wonder what people outside of South Florida are looking at, and if they're just not aware of what Miami has. The Pro Football Focus doesn't even have Miami's running back room in the top 10, which I think is crazy. Like in terms of units, I feel are probably better than Miami's on paper. There's not many of them. I would probably take Notre Dame's running back room with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. I think it'd be fair to take them ahead of ours. And of course, we're going to see them in less than 2 weeks. Penn State has a really good running back situation with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And I'd possibly on paper take Louisville with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, but that's about it in terms of like objectively which running back rooms I would take over Miami's with Fletcher, Lyle, and Marty Brown. And as I mentioned, PFF does not have Miami's running back room even ranked in the top 10, which I think is absurd. Offensive line. You know how I feel. I think Miami has the best offensive line in the country. I think the other really good ones on paper, and, Miami only sees, I think, one of those. Well, actually, a lot of folks will say it. Pro Football Focus actually has Florida's O-line ranked in front of Miami's, which I don't think is right, but that's an excellent offensive line. We're going to see later this year. Notre Dame's offensive line is really good, but they have some injuries, including Jagasa, their starting right guard, who I don't think he's going to be healthy in time for Miami. So they're a little bit banged up, but Notre Dame's O-line, when healthy, is really good. Alabama is projected to have a really good O-line this year. Utah, same thing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you could argue people would take those over Miami's, but I think Miami's got the best offensive line in the country. Pro Football Focus somehow has Miami's O-line ranked 8th. They also have Miami's defensive line ranked 8th nationally. I think that unit can absolutely trend into the top 5 if the defensive tackle depth, as I mentioned, really steps up, because Miami has what looks like an elite edge rusher rotation. Rueben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, Armando Blunt, Hayden Lowe, Malik Bryant, Marquise Lightfoot, Cole McConaughey. If I left anybody out, let me know, but I expect at least like potentially 7 to play pivotal roles this year. Pro Football Focus ranks their top defensive line as Clemson, Alabama, Texas Tech, Florida, Penn State, Michigan, and Georgia. So we're going to see 2 of those actually one of those. Florida's for sure. Maybe we'll see Clemson's as well. Those are the ones that they have ranked ahead of Miami. They do not have Miami with top 10 units at receiver. Running back, as I mentioned, they don't have our linebackers in the top 10 or our defensive backs in the top 10. For reference, Miami faces Notre Dame week 1. Pro Football Focus has Notre Dame with a top 10 unit in everything except quarterback and defensive line. Every other area, they rank Notre Dame in the top 10. And again, I think that Miami's defensive line depth and players meeting the expectations this year, I think that could be the deciding factor as to whether or not we make it into the college football playoff. And on that note, got a question I want to answer on the other side about the players on Miami's roster that have the most to gain and the most to lose this year. I think they both play the same position. We want to keep it locked. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? OpenPhone solves that instantly. They have an AI agent that handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer again. See why over 60,000 businesses trust OpenPhone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's OPENPHONE.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. OpenPhone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Oh, we're also proudly brought to you by PrizePicks, my friends, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up. College football is not far behind. Guys, this weekend is week 0. Whether you've got your name on big name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the game. Folks, PrizePicks is simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. I've been using PrizePicks since 2021. I love how simple it is. I can get my lineup in before my coffee finishes brewing in the morning. The flex play is a game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still double your money. Plus, PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we got this question from Bucks Canes from Evans, Georgia, who says, hey, excluding Carson Beck, name the other player that has the most to gain and a different player that has the most to lose this upcoming season. Now, listen, I'm big on the collective, but of course, I understand certain players have a lot to gain when it comes to their NFL draft stock. And, you made me exclude Carson Beck because he's such an obvious pick. I'm going to go with, for the player with the most to gain, this is based on a conversation I had with him at ACC Media Days. And this was an on-air thing. You guys can go back and watch the interview. But, when I asked Akeem Mesidor why he decided to come back for his senior year when he didn't have to, like he could have left for the NFL draft, but, he made the type of decision that not every player makes when they leave Miami early, because we've seen players leave a year early to only go undrafted, to go the undrafted free agent route. Akeem Mesidor might have been drafted. Like he said, he was getting draft grades like day 3, late rounds. And based on his understanding, because you can get the official NFL draft evaluations, you get the feedback from scouts. His understanding was that, if he comes back to Miami and just has like an okay year, pretty good year, that it's very unlikely his draft stock would fall below where it was last season. That, based on his measurables and his resume, they have a pretty good idea as to what Akeem Mesidor is, right? So he doesn't feel like he has a lot to lose. But on the flip side, the feedback Mesidor got is that if he has a really strong year this year, that his draft stock can potentially surge, right? I mean, we'd all love to see him end up, a first or a second round pick. So just based on that, where, he doesn't seem to think that, based on what he's already done at the college level, that his stock can lower, but his stock can definitely raise. So I'll put him in that conversation. On the flip side, and I don't mean this as a negative because I expect this player to have a great year, but I think based on draft projections, I think Rueben Bain potentially has a lot to lose, right? I mean, he's, coming off a 2024 season that was challenging for him. Like he's still, relative to the amount of snaps he played, he was productive. Like he still had good, advanced analytics, the Pro Football Focus stuff. Like he still objectively played well. He just didn't play enough last year. He was injured, was playing through injury, didn't have the type of impact he had with his freshman season. Despite that, and I'm happy to see this, draft services are still really bullish on Bain. He's getting a lot of first-round NFL draft projections. He's showing up on a lot of preseason All-America teams, right? Him, Francis Maui-Noah are the Miami guys who continually show up on those lists. So I'm going to say Rueben Bain. And again, I don't mean this as a negative because I think he's going to play great. He's trimmed down. He's healthy. He's dominating in practice. But he's got a lot to lose because unlike Akeem Mesidor, who you could say is projected to be like a late-round guy, Rueben Bain is projected as a potential first-round draft pick. And, if he gives the scouts and the GMs any reason to scrutinize him, that's what NFL GMs do. They look for reasons not to draft you in the first round. So I think Rueben Bain has a lot to lose, and I think he's going to live up to the billing this year. I mean, that's someone, again, based on what we've been seeing in practice and hearing about the practices that have been closed off. Bain has been a consistently dominant performer. Mario Cristobal has said it a couple times within the last week, so I think he's going to live up to it. All right, so here was something. Shout out to Chris Stock at Inside the U for pointing this stat out. Because again, last year on defense, we all saw what we saw, right? I mean, Miami's D, it cost them a college football playoff appearance. Like, it cost them the opportunity to win a national championship. So how is it somehow Miami ranked 27th in the country in total defense, which is not bad. That's way better than average, right? Now, in points allowed, they were worse at 70th, which is average. But here's the stat where Miami's defense really failed last year. Kudos to Chris Stock for pointing this out. Miami last season was 108th nationally in red zone defense. It's 108th out of 134. Bad. They allowed 67% of opposing team red zone trips. They allowed opponents points. They ranked 14th out of 17 in the ACC, allowing touchdowns at a 71.4% clip last year. They write, the poor results in a critical area of the field led the Hurricanes ranking 13th in scoring defenses in the conference during conference play, despite ranking 4th in total defense in the conference. Defensive coordinator Lance Guidry was replaced after completion of his second season in Coral Gables with Corey Heatherman, who guided Minnesota to top 10 rankings in scoring, defense, and total defense. Heatherman's Golden Gophers tied for 16th in red zone defense, allowing opponents to score touchdowns on 50% of their 34 trips, which tied for the 7th fewest. The biggest key for a successful red zone defense, Corey Heatherman said, don't let them down there, was his response. But yeah, but even when Minnesota did let them down there, still a lot better at 16th in the country than Miami was 108th nationally in red zone defense. So if you're looking for that disconnect, like how were they 27th in total defense, yet they were that bad? Red zone defense is where Miami failed. There was bending and breaking. They always say bend but don't break. Miami was breaking too much in the red zone. That's an area where the defense has to improve. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. A lot of programming to look out for in the next 24 hours. We're going to have our big ACC preview show with me and 5 other hosts from ACC channels here on Locked On. We'll talk about our conference champion picks, conference championship game, coaches on the hot seat. Spoiler alert, Mario Cristobal is not. So the ACC preview show is coming out later on today. I'm also going to do a special State of Florida episode, crossover episode, with Brian Smith from Locked On Seminoles and everyone's favorite, Brandon Olson from Locked On Gay. I don't know why you guys give Brandon such a hard time. He's such a good dude. But Brandon Olson and Brian Smith and I are going to talk about, the big 3 in the state of Florida. I think we're going to drop that episode either tonight or early tomorrow. So we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.